Today, we speak with Andrew Adams, founder and CEO of Headway, a platform building a new mental health care system by making it simple for therapists to accept insurance and for patients to find affordable care. Andrew comes to the problem first as a patient and then as a builder, grounding the company's mission in lived experience and a focus on practical fixes to cost and access. Founded in 2019, Headway now powers over 600,000 appointments per month, has raised over $325 million from leading investors including Andreessen Horowitz, Thrive Capital, Accel, GV, and others. Headway partners with major health plans across all 50 states to operate one of the country's largest insurance-accepted therapist networks. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you liked the episode, click to follow. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
It's great to be here, bridging the distance digitally between New York City and Princeton, New Jersey, RJ.
Excellent. So as I was kind of prepping for this interview and I looked at your background, wonderful background, highly technical and skilled from Stanford. Then you did a couple things out of undergrad in your master's program, but eventually you decided to found your company. And I'm curious how you came about honing in on the exact idea or problem that you wanted to solve.
It's a great question. I don't think I homed in on the idea. I think the idea and the problem homed in on me. And I feel really fortunate for that. I feel fortunate the problem that I encountered that afflicted me wasn't like an obscure, tiny problem, but was a problem that was a generational problem, a problem worthy of the company and the efforts of the people who are working here at Headway. And the problem that we're encountering is building a new mental health care system that everybody can access, because right now, most of the people with a treatable mental health condition like a depression or anxiety or PTSD don't access it. And this was not a problem I went and looked for. This was a problem that came and found me. And you sort of mentioned a little bit of my education to early work history arc. And indeed, actually, it was in school where the mental health and mental health issues found me. You mentioned some technical background, some other pieces of background, the Stanford education. The thing that most prepared me for doing what I'm doing is, I think, being a patient first and foremost. I'm somebody whose life was changed when I saw a therapist. I saw someone that really helped with depression I was going through at the time. And there was a time I didn't think I'd make it to 30. I really, feel like my life was saved because of mental health care, because of a therapist. And man, I feel so much gratefulness for that. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved to New York City as part of settling down, I wanted to find another therapist again. And I failed. I couldn't find anybody whom I felt like I could afford, which at the time meant accepted my insurance. And if I could have used my insurance, right, co-pays are $30, $40, $50 rather than an out-of-pocket fee, which is inaccessible to many folks. And it turns out this problem wasn't even a unique problem, even the problem in the space, certainly at the time, that 1 in 4 Americans have a treatable mental health condition. Most don't get care. The number one reason is price. And meanwhile, most behavioral health clinicians, therapists, psychiatrists, they don't accept insurance. They weren't participating in the broader healthcare ecosystem, therefore. And so we have built out a network of behavioral health clinicians, therapists, psychiatrists that do accept insurance, because we make it really easy for them. Mm-hmm. They see patients, they get paid, and we strive to be the easiest and most profitable way for a behavioral health clinician to accept insurance. And we do so being both easy and profitable by using technology so that they see patients, they get paid. We handle with technology all the things that could make accepting insurance administratively burdensome. I wish I had them offhand, but there's wild ratios of how many administrators are manually helping clinicians in the medical world. Hospital systems are dominated not by clinicians, but their staff are dominated by administrators and back office folks. The individual therapists who don't exist in these big systems don't have the ability to pay for the professional billers and take on all that work. And so we've come and built a solution that makes it really easy for them. And thus, we have a network of therapists that do accept insurance. And not only do they accept insurance, and now I get to talk about how we have facilitated and we facilitate tens of millions of mental health care appointments every year that otherwise wouldn't happen if it weren't for what we're doing to help make accepting insurance easy and thus make it accessible to patients and providers. We also have earned the right to do something even bigger, which is all of our clinicians are on a single tech platform. So we can think about a better, smarter mental health care world, not just one that is opening up the accessibility that we have today. And so, man, I feel so lucky. And like I mentioned, this problem found me because if I went and looked and said, oh, what spaces do I want to work in? Legitimately, the last one would have been healthcare. And in my mind, healthcare and the problems that were solvable by people who really understood the medicine and the science. But then I encountered a world actually that had a lot of incentive and structural issues that a willing tech entrepreneur that's willing to wade through what does this acronym mean and can help figure out. So ultimately, it's a little bit about how I didn't search for the problem found me.
You mentioned the statistic of 1 in 4 that have a mental health problem. And I wonder if the ratio could be even higher. I mean, I guess mental health issues could maybe be plotted on a spectrum. Like, at what point do you consider it a legitimate mental health problem? And I guess my question really is, at what point should someone consider seeking out therapy?
You're asking a really hard, profound question that I may stumble through and offer sort of conjectures. Let me sort of echo it back. You sort of said, hey, Andrew, you mentioned 1 in 4 folks have a treatable mental health condition as defined maybe by some clinical standard. And you sort of said, hey, actually, is that number higher? Is it not 1 in 4, but is it 1 in 3? And then also like, sure, maybe by some DSM ICD-10 diagnosis, by the clinical standards, you might have depression or anxiety, but what about something that falls a little bit beneath that boundary? What about something that is not, you wouldn't say is clinical, but meets some standard of mental health thing you're going through that you'd want to feel differently for? Does that roughly feels like your question?
Yeah.
I agree. I think there's really interesting fluid boundaries that we haven't had a chance as an industry to help figure out. And one of the things I really believe is actually letting individuals figure it out for them. So what I mean by this is, the first part is the industry, we haven't had a chance to figure out. We haven't had an opportunity to debate, what's the right boundary through which insurance should decide and the system should decide this care meets clinical standards or not. The first hair on fire problem is we know there's tons of people for whom clearly it meets a clinical standard who are trying to wrestle with deep depression, deep anxiety, severe eating disorder, so on and so forth. Go down the list of any possible mental health condition that clearly meets any clinical standard one might have. The number one problem was they're not getting in the door getting care. And as a company, we've been trying to solve that biggest problem. As we get deeper and deeper into solving the access problem, I think we'll find ourselves playing a role in some sense, the quote unquote, and I'll really air quoting here for folks that are listening to the podcast, the quality problem. And I think it's a really hairy problem that I'm like almost loath to like conjecture too much. But ultimately, I believe that clinicians need a seat at the table for defining what is quality care. But as for who gets that care, I fundamentally believe that market participants should have the right to decide. So what I mean by that is like right now, much of healthcare is administered and paid for by employers. And you have different employers that want different things that in turn represent the will and desires of people. There's some employers that say, you know what? I don't care if this patient, if my employee doesn't meet some clinical standard, I want them to get some mental health care and I'm going to subsidize that effectively. And then you have some employers that are saying, you know what, man, for various different reasons, we don't feel like we can afford or want to support subsidizing care that doesn't meet some clinical standards. So we won't do that. Ultimately, like where that boundary is in terms of subsidizing some level, because that's effectively what employer-sponsored healthcare is. You're subsidizing care for an individual to get it. I think it fundamentally should be up to the market participants. I don't believe that a therapist should be forced to say, you cannot give this person care because they don't give a clinical standard. Nor do I believe that we should say to the people buying care, you must buy this, you must buy that. But again, the thing that I would temper is that clinicians should be at the table to decide what is sort of safe or not safe. And ultimately, though, like the larger things that I would believe in is people should decide. And I want to enable the structures that allow that just effectively don't exist today. We're so far from a system for being able to measure and understand and give market participants the right to decide, do you want A or B? And anyway, I'm rambling a bit here, but my shortest answer would be, again, you're asking a really profound question. I don't think anyone in a room should decide this is quality and that's bad.
Hmm.
Even though if some people are deciding some level of safety standards, for instance, I really believe that therapists should be free to practice the care that they want. And some therapists practice different types of approaches that have been shown to work for different types of people. I think people should be able to decide which types of care ultimately work for them. And I think those who are paying for it should have those decisions too. And ultimately, I think if you put that stew of market participation together, a therapist trying to be better therapists, a patient's trying to get what works for them, of the folks paying for care trying to be thoughtful where their dollars go, quality will emerge. I don't think the right thing is for me to enumerate this is what quality means. Care must be delivered in this manner, and that's just not how anything powerful has emerged.
Hmm.
The alchemy of smart people and people getting together, deciding what works for them, I think ultimately is what makes sense. So
Hmm.
that is sort of the long-winded answer to quality. But again, we're in an interesting moment where fundamentally the industry is still really focusing on like, we don't need to debate. We know care works. We know providers are doing good care. Still, for almost every insurance company, for instance, that we work with, the number one concern is like, can we get that care for people?
Hmm.
Not sort of the next step that comes thereafter, though I'm very excited for a company to play a role there.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's maybe the beginnings of a person having mental health issues. Maybe they're very mild, but they could eventually escalate and become something a little bit more damaging, where then it's like clear that this is depression, this is high anxiety. But if that person had been seeking treatment, accessing treatment earlier, they could have maybe curbed the escalation. And it's kind of top of mind. I live in Princeton, New Jersey. There's Princeton students here, especially at these high pressured academic institutions where things happen. Students go missing eventually, and unfortunately they'll turn up and, they may not be alive. So I wonder if certain students at these institutions, as soon as they have a hint that there could be a problem, they immediately seek help.
So effectively, the question I hear you asking is, hey, might preventative mental health care work before something is a clinical issue? To which my first thing I would say is, I'm not a clinician. I'm a healthcare tech entrepreneur. I help with the technology that makes it easy to accept insurance. I'm working with clinicians to help build a better system, but I'm not a clinician. Ultimately, I would defer to the clinicians around me. And this is a nice teaser. We're going to have a big announcement in terms of our executive team, in terms of clinical leadership. But ultimately, when I ask the clinicians around me, I'm sure they would agree with you. Administering mental health care before one has an acute issue could curb or prevent an acute issue. Like, I'm sure that they would agree with you.
Hmm. We've spent a lot of time talking about the distinct kind of problem. Maybe switching over into your entrepreneurial experience, can you tell us a little bit about the stage you're currently at, with the company? You can describe that in whichever metrics you're comfortable sharing.
Sure. I mean, I come forward here as the CEO and founder of Headway. We work with many, many tens of thousands of clinicians, making it easy and more profitable for them to accept insurance. They, in turn, have served, you would measure in the millions of patients.
Hmm.
As a business, that means that we are responsible for the payment flows, the making accepting insurance easy for what represents billions of dollars of mental health care. And we really feel privileged to have a seat at the table to help bridge providers, clinicians, the patients, and then the health insurance companies that you work at. So to translate that to this audience here, we do billions of dollars of annualized gross revenue. And we have effectively a take rate business on top of that gross. And we're representing the patient side in terms of a user or customer account to translate to this business audience. And we're talking about over millions. The behavioral health clinician, tens of thousands. We are the largest network of behavioral health clinicians. We work with the vast majority of insurance companies in the United States. So we're talking about hundreds there. And then in terms of headcount of the business, in terms of full-time headcount, we're around 800 or so employees. By fundraising milestones, we've raised over $300 million. Our last fundraising round, when we were a fraction of our current revenue scale, was we were valued at a year and a half ago at this point, or so $2.3 billion. And I think based on the progress we've made for all of our users, we're a more valuable business than that now, but such as private market valuations. And hopefully that's helpful.
Hmm. What's been the biggest challenge so far in scaling the business? I mean, you've done an amazing job in building the business, but what has been, I guess, the toughest part to really building this company?
The short answer is everything. And let me just try to like convey the enormity of everything. You sort of asked, what's been the biggest challenge? Maybe I'll give you two answers. One is this cop-out answer, everything, and then I'll give you a better one. The cop-out answer is everything, and that truly feels right. Like when you ask the question, what's been the biggest challenge building this business? My mind can't even comprehend the question. There's an adage that every time your business doubles, you're a new business. So if you double your organization size, you're mostly new employees. If you double your user size, it's mostly new users. If you double your revenue, it's mostly new dollars. Double your product lines of code, it's mostly a new product. From nothing to billions of dollars of annualized gross revenue. I don't have the logarithmic math in my head right now, but we've doubled whatever, like 30 times, 15 times. And so effectively, I'm not coming here as the CEO and founder of one company. I'm coming here as the CEO and founder of 15 to 30 different companies, because every time we double, it's a new company. And I've had to have, like, it's truly been a very different journey for every single one. So like the first answer I give you is everything is I've had to be 30 different CEOs and founders. And like, sure, yeah, a CEO's job is different every day, but truly, like if you look at any interval of doubling of the business, I have to be a new person. And the enormity of that is very hard. So my less of a cop-out answer I would give you is like the most important journey that I have been on. Again, I'm somebody had never managed anybody, let alone manage an organization of nearly 1,000 employees. And I had like a year of prior work experience. I had to really learn. And ultimately, the most important thing I had to learn to manage or lead wasn't the organization, but was at some point it became myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very much a believer that like you can read high output management and no rules, and the score takes care of itself, and see a template for what a one-on-one looks like and a staff meeting looks like, and read from Claire Hughes Johnson, that tactical, vital materials there. You can read the how-to and learn, hey, you can kind of like genuinely be a pretty good manager. And then you got to learn this thing and that. And at some point, like your ability to learn is capped by somehow fundamentally who you are. You've got strengths, then you learn the tactical things, and then you need to get better and better and better, because your organization, if it's like Headway, is one of the fastest growing organizations at our scale in the United States, has been one of the fastest growing to date. It grows so fast, it pushes you, and it'll push you to a place where you will fail. And you'll fail beyond a boundary where you can just learn something or tactically understand how to do something. It will challenge some fundamental aspect of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then you will have to learn to manage yourself. You'll have to learn to manage, wait, I'm not learning this, not because I don't understand it, because there's some part of me that's holding myself back. And you have to learn what you need and what your person needs. And man, it's a very challenging thing to do.
That's a wonderful answer, particularly because I've conducted this interview with many entrepreneurs, and a lot of them say, I'm the entrepreneur from an up to 200 person company, but I'm not the next guy. And I'll ask them, well, why not? Why not transform yourself or learn the next role? And some of them will say, it's just not for me.
And that's the point. Like, truly, it was not for that person. And this role was not for me, who I was a year or 2 or 3 ago. You need to have a fundamental reconstitution of yourself, because there's some things, this annoys me or this bothers me. Some things that really bother you, things that really annoy you, are truly like resulting, I believe, from some internal sense of self, some internal pain you once felt, again. And you have to understand why you do that. And you have to understand how to let go. To your point, entrepreneurs tap out when they're like, this isn't for me. And it's not because they like tactically can't. I think it's because fundamental aspects of who they are misaligned. And so when I said the most important journey is like learning to manage yourself, you need to fundamentally change parts of yourself. So like, I'll be a little abstract. Like one of the things that has been really helpful, and is very helpful even a smaller organization you are, is I am intense. I will drive and push. And one of the things that like keeps me going is an insecurity. I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not doing enough. And that really works, especially when you're maybe just motivating yourself or just, but the other side of that intensity, never enough, is like, you can kind of be, and at least for me, I should speak, the other side of that intensity of like always pushing is like not being as emotionally accessible. And so you can be emotionally inaccessible when the only person you're managing is you, and you got a co-founder, and it's like, sure, whatever, we'll figure it out. But at some point, like we have a management principle here at Headway that your wake is bigger than your boat. And so like, cool, when there's a couple people in this organization, I may be able to push and kind of be frustrating or irritable. And the blast radius, the wake of that is only to a couple people. But when I have an organization of like 1,000 people, it really matters. If I show up grumpy or frustrated in a meeting, that ripples across the entire organization. So all of a sudden, like how I emotionally show up, my emotional temperament, all of a sudden matters because it affects not one person, me, and then maybe, oh, my co-founder here, my co-founder, 3 or 4 people. It affects like 1,000 people. And so your emotional temperament begins to really matter. Your disposition, how you show up, these soft things matter that are all the more important. And to adjust them, to figure out how they can be different, really involves like self-work. And so whether it's like you need to transform because you need to control how what your emotional affect is, or because that ripples through an organization, or you find yourself frustrated by something, a type of work you don't want to do, a type of work you feel like, I just don't want to do this, you need to find a way to reconstitute yourself, to tolerate, to enjoy, to find out why it really bothers you and find a different way to do it.
And your drive really to make Headway into a big, successful company, where does that come from? Like, you're having impact as is.
I think it comes from 2 different places. I think it comes from both love and from fear. The fear is that when I close my eyes, when I think about the thing that has brought me throughout my life, the biggest sense of shame, the thing that I want to cover up, the thing that I feel most, it's that I'm not enough. And so one of the reasons I push and push and push, part of that is driven by some fear that I'm not enough. So I want to push and push and push. And part of that has been pretty productive, right? You drive high standards. Ultimately, like fear alone will burn you out. And you need to also draw from love. And so love is something that's beautiful and high standards. But there's also the love that comes from outward. And like the fear is something that's very inward, that I am not enough. The love has always come from the moments of looking a therapist in the eye and hearing their pathos, hearing the like, I'm trying to do this, but I am one person. I am one person drowning in a system that wasn't built for me, that wasn't built for an individual clinician. And then knowing that I could help them, seeing this person that looks like or feels like or talks like the therapist that saved my life, or speaking with an employee who I've been with for years, who I see in a glimmer of their eye, the intensity that feels like kin with my own, or seeing somebody I know transform themselves over a period of time. The love I feel for my fellow employees that I work with every day, the love that I feel for the therapists I work with, the love that I feel for the insurance companies who find themselves in this impossible decision to decide who gets how much healthcare, and knowing the burdens that they feel. That love is a powerful piece of motivation. So ultimately, like fear and love, I think, are the 2 fundamental atomic units of where I draw inspiration. And ultimately, like I'm trying to shift more and more to love rather than fear. Fear is like a dirty fuel that has these emissions. Love is a much more clean resource and has a renewability to it. So I'm much more oriented and motivated by love. But man, I'll always have some of that insecurity, and I greet it with love when it emerges, but I'm going to use it to my advantage to build something that is going to change the world. And we live in a world of billions of people. I feel privileged to order of magnitude have affected the lives of millions, but I see an opportunity for tens and hundreds of millions thereafter. And I see a world where everybody gets the mental health care they deserve. And I see ourselves as an ability to really enable that for the whole country. I'm excited to make that happen.
In terms of the content you have on your site about hiring and bringing in talent, you're very open to all people.
Yep.
And, accommodating whatever issues they may have in showing up for an interview or maybe even doing their job. You're very open to considering all candidates. At the same time, you're very driven and you're looking for particular people. So what are the key qualities you look for in people that work for Headway?
Yeah, it's interesting. Physical disabilities, health concerns, diversity, very accommodating, very open. And certainly the manner even which one of the things I think will surprise a lot of people at Headway who come from a typical quote unquote corporate environment is like, you have a CEO who, as soon as they meet you, talks about how we dealt with depression, overcome suicidality. And like, so we're emotionally open here. We actually are very not open and are not there for every type of person. We list our cultural principles truly verbatim. And like, there's some people that have cultural principles that exist as marketing material on their website. The cultural principles that are on our website are the cultural principles that I will talk through everybody when they join Headway, are the principles that we are actually in our performance review rubric. And in them, we describe not only who we want, but also are clear, hey, like, this is not for everybody. You will not like this if you're looking for these things. And we're very blunt about some things. We talk about our Olympic performance standard. And we tell you that if your manager would not fight to keep you, and this is the Netflix Keeper Test Manifest, if your manager would not fight to keep you, then we will graciously part ways with you and help you find what's next for you. That's intense. That's not for everybody. I actually, find it has certainly actually some actually nice emotional and liberating things, which is, your manager is here and believes in you. There are a lot of people who work for managers that don't believe in them, but are too lazy and or averting of the hard situation and or don't work in a performance environment to actually do the kind thing, which is set that person free to find someone who does believe in them. So we are a pretty intense culture. We have our principles listed pretty verbatim. And my goal actually is, and one of the things that, my team will smile when we hear this, one of the things we did is when we are refining our cultural principles that are very similar to the ones that we started with, that we tweaked a little bit, I deliberately went to some people who I said, this person is not going to be successful in our environment. This person has actually maybe even been in our environment and has not been successful here. I want them to hear this and say, this isn't for me. Not in like an offensive alienation, but truly in a self-selection. Mm-hmm. The goal of this was to motivate our employees, but really to motivate the people that we think are the paragon sort of our employee, for whom your culture becomes more and more like. And so we very much say things that we are clear with things that we believe, and some things people out, for instance, we list in Olympic performance standards. For instance, we have an idea of being a Headway owner, which means you go where you're needed, which means our goals ultimately ladder customer and business goals and our mission. There are some companies and some people want to join a company that have goals that are ultimately employee sentiment. And now no, we find that actually striving for others is a powerful way to find fulfillment. And that's what we believe in. And if you want to be at a company that has, one of its most important metric is some sentiment score, it's not the right place. So I really, rather than even go over truly, I wrote every single word on our careers page, cultural principles, every single word. There's not a sentence, there's not a punctuation mark that I'm not like this. And so I would really encourage, and moreover, don't even hear about it from me, because a CEO can say this is what our culture is, but our culture is ultimately what is done. It's the emergent group properties, the things that happen when you're not looking, the default behaviors, and therefore it's done by the group. And so we have people who are Headway employees talking about what this means for me, what this cultural principle means for me. But yeah.
Excellent. Last question. Can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
There are truly thousands. You don't go from having 11 months of work experience at a company that wasn't particularly successful, but was a failure. In fact, you don't go from 11 months of experience at a company that was a failure to being a CEO and founder of one of the fastest growing multi-billion-dollar healthcare tech companies, solving a vital problem in this country, mental health access, without a lot of people helping you. Mm-hmm. And I had people help me with lessons. I had people give their time. I had a lot of people help me with this, giving me leeway as I screwed up and screwed up and screwed up on that path to being the next incarnation of the founder CEO I needed to be. But man, if I had to isolate one, I will pick the therapist, Dr. Lori Plan, who I think saved my life. And thank you for not only allowing me to be here and be alive, but introducing me to a problem and a problem space that, man, has been my life's work. I go by Andrew. My last name is Adams, but Andrew Adams, CEO and founder of Headway, feels like my true name, my true identity, and I thank her for it.
Andrew, I want to thank you again for taking the time for this conversation. It's truly been a great one.
Thank you. I appreciate it a lot. Thanks especially for letting me ramble a little bit as we explored some of those early topics.